Bellwether Museum Vault. Audio Accession Review, Recording 1. My name is Jenna Beaulieu, Collections Recording Assistant. Today's date is... Actually, no. Let me start over. My name is Jenna Beaulieu. I've recently been assigned to the museum's unprovenanced holdings collection. According to the orientation packet, these recordings are intended to supplement written catalog entries that are incomplete, damaged, or otherwise unreliable about the museum's acquisitions that have no verified provenance. I think that's a fancy way of saying they don't know where it came from. Today's date is July 22nd, 2026. The current time is 9:58 in the morning. This is my 4th day in the Bellwether Museum vaults, and the first day I've been trusted to work through one of the account folders on my own. Trusted may be the wrong word. Martin showed me the desk, handed me 3 boxes, and said, "You'll figure it out." And then he left. So perhaps abandoned is more accurate. The job itself is straightforward. The museum has hundreds of written accounts associated with objects in the unprovenanced collection. Some were provided by donors. Some were written by museum employees. Others were found in storage besides the objects they were supposedly describing. Most of these accounts have never been entered into the digital catalog. My job is to read each one, type it into the system exactly as written, and attach it to the appropriate accession record. Spelling mistakes remain. Grammatical errors remain. Anything crossed out should be noted, but not omitted. Anything added in a different hand should be identified when possible. I was specifically told not to correct, summarize, interpret, or improve the material, which means the museum is paying me to preserve every terrible sentence ever written by a frightened person with a typewriter. Honestly, I've had worse jobs. Unfortunately, the computer assigned to this room is refusing to cooperate. I've typed the first paragraph of today's account 4 times. Each time I read the end of the paragraph, the text disappears. It doesn't delete. The screen doesn't refresh. The words simply vanish from the document one at a time, beginning with the last word and working backwards. I restarted the program. Then I restarted the computer. Then I turned the computer off, waited the full 30 seconds recommended by the museum's technology department, and turned it on again. It continued from the exact word where it had stopped, deleting backwards. I called upstairs, but there was no answer. I called Martin. He said he was in a meeting and suggested I keep handwritten notes until someone from technology can come downstairs. The account is already handwritten. Writing a handwritten copy of a handwritten account feels less like digitization and more like joining a medieval monastery. So, I'm recording it instead. I can transcribe the audio later when the system is working. The first folder is marked UH-0017. There is no object name on the tab. The corresponding accession record contains only the following information: photographic materials, 15 items, black and white print, various dimensions, date unknown, donor unknown. There's a note beneath that. Do not separate photographs from written account. The folder contains 14 photographs and 1 typed statement. Not 15 photographs. I counted twice. The photographs are held together with a paper band. I have not removed it yet. The statement is 9 pages long. It was written on a manual typewriter. Several corrections were made in black ink. The author gives his name as Thomas Vail. There's no date on the first page. The final page is signed, but not witnessed. I'll begin the transcription now. Statement of Thomas Vale. I do not know whether this account will be believed. I have delayed writing it because I understood how it would sound, and because I have spent most of the past year trying to convince myself that I misunderstood what happened. I no longer believe that. My name is Thomas Vale. In 1986, I worked as a freelance photographer in Baltimore. Most of my work was unremarkable. Weddings, school portraits, insurance claims, local advertisements, and photographs of properties scheduled for sale or demolition. I preferred buildings. Buildings did not complain about the lighting. They did not blink at the wrong moment, or ask whether I could make them appear thinner. They remained where they were placed. At least, that was what I believed then. In October of that year, I was contacted by a man named Daniel Mercer. Mr. Mercer worked for a company responsible for clearing properties purchased by the city. He asked whether I could photograph a house on Wren Street before it was demolished. The building had been vacant for years. There had been a fire in the neighboring property, and although the house itself had not burned, the structure was considered unsafe. Mr. Mercer needed photographs of every room before demolition began. I asked whether the photographs were for insurance purposes. He said they were for the record. When I asked what record, he did not answer. I was given the address, a key, and 1 day to complete the work. The house was number 41 Wren Street. It stood at the end of a row of narrow brick houses, most of which were already empty. The windows on the ground floor had been covered with plywood. The front steps were cracked. There was no name on the mailbox. The only unusual feature was the front door. It had recently been painted blue. The color was bright and clean against the rest of the building. There were no chips in the paint, no dust around the handle, and no signs that the door had been exposed to weather. I assumed it had been replaced after the building was condemned. The key Mr. Mercer gave me opened it easily. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and old plaster. There was very little furniture. A small table remained in the entrance hall. There were 2 chairs in the kitchen, a mattress in an upstairs bedroom, and several cardboard boxes filled with newspaper. Everything was covered in dust. Everything except the floor directly inside the front door. There were footprints there. They began at the threshold and continued towards the stairs. The prints were narrow and appeared to have been made by a woman's shoe. I called Mr. Mercer from the telephone in my car. I told him someone might be inside the property. He said that was impossible. The house had been checked that morning, the windows were secured, and I had the only key. I asked whether he wanted me to contact the police. He said no. He told me to complete the photographs and leave. I should have refused. I know that now. At the time, I assumed the footprints belonged to whichever employee had inspected the building. I brought in my equipment and began on the ground floor. I used a 35mm camera with black and white film. I carried a flash unit, a tripod, and 3 spare rolls. My instructions were to photograph each room from the doorway, followed by any significant damage. The front room was empty. The dining room contained a broken cabinet. The kitchen ceiling had partially collapsed near the rear wall. I photographed each area, noted the frame numbers in my book, and moved upstairs. The footprints continued along the upstairs hallway. They stopped in front of the rear bedroom. The bedroom door was closed. I remember standing there for several seconds with my hand on the knob. There was no sound from inside. I opened the door and found the room empty. The mattress lay directly on the floor. The wallpaper had peeled away in long strips. There was a dark stain above the window. I photographed the room. As the flash went off, I saw someone standing behind the door. I turned immediately. There was no one there. The space behind the door was barely wide enough for a person to stand. I checked the closet. It was empty. I checked beneath the mattress. Nothing. I told myself I'd seen my own shadow when the flash fired. I continued working. The second bedroom faced the street. The third had been used for storage. The bathroom contained an iron tub and no sink. At the front of the hallway, there was a narrow door leading to the attic stairs. I photographed the stairs from below, but did not go up. The inspection notice attached to the front entrance stated that the attic floor was unstable. I returned downstairs and packed my equipment. Before leaving, I counted the exposed frames on the roll. I had taken 14 photographs. That matched my notes. 4 rooms downstairs, 4 upstairs, 3 areas of structural damage: the staircase, the attic door, and the exterior. 14 photographs. I locked the front door and returned the key to Mr. Mercer's office that afternoon. He asked whether I had encountered anyone inside. I told him I had not. I did not mention what I thought I saw behind the bedroom door. I developed the film that evening. The first photograph showed the exterior of the house. The second showed the entrance hall. The third showed the front room. The prints were ordinary until I reached the rear bedroom. In the photograph taken from the doorway, a woman was standing beside the mattress. She faced the wall. She wore a dark dress that reached below her knees. Her hair was tied behind her head. Her face was not visible. I checked the negative. The woman was present there as well. I had not seen her when I took the photograph. I knew that with certainty. I had entered the room. I had checked behind the door and inside the closet. There had been no one there. I assumed the film had been exposed twice. It was unlikely, but possible. I printed the photograph again. The woman appeared in the second print. This time, she was closer to the camera. I compared the 2 photographs. The room was identical. The mattress, the window, the damaged wallpaper, and the water stain had not changed. Only the woman had moved. In the first print, she stood beside the mattress. In the second, she stood halfway between the mattress and the doorway. Her body remained turned towards the wall. Her head had turned slightly in my direction. I made a third print. The woman stood directly in front of the camera. Her face was beyond the edge of the frame. Only the lower half of her body was visible. I destroyed all 3 prints. I placed the negative in an envelope and locked it inside my desk. I did not sleep that night. The following morning, I contacted Mr. Mercer. I asked who had lived previously in the house. He said he did not know. I asked whether anyone had died there. He told me people died in houses every day. Then he asked whether I had found the room. I asked which room he meant. He did not answer. The line went silent. After several seconds, he told me to bring him the photographs and all negatives immediately. I said I needed time to print the remaining frames. He told me there were 15 photographs. I corrected him. I'd taken 14. He repeated that there were 15 and ended the call. I returned to the dark room. The negatives were still inside my locked desk. There were 15 exposures on the strip. The additional image appeared between the rear bedroom and the upstairs hallway. This was impossible. I had not advanced the film between those photographs. My notes confirmed it. There was no missing frame number. The 15th image showed a room I had not seen inside the house. It was small and windowless. The walls were covered with floral wallpaper. There was a wooden chair in the center. On the chair was a neat stack of photographs. The door through which the photograph had been taken was visible at the edge of the frame. Beyond the doorway, I could see part of the upstairs hall. The room appeared to occupy the space between the rear bedroom and the bathroom. There had been no door there. I had photographed that section of the hallway. It was a blank wall. I printed the image. The first print showed the empty chair and the stack of photographs. I made a second print. The chair was no longer empty. The woman in the dark dress was sitting on it. Her back faced the camera. The stack of photographs rested on her lap. I should have stopped. Instead, I made a third print. The chair was empty again. The woman stood in the doorway. She was facing the camera. Her face was blurred, not out of focus. The rest of the image was sharp. The wallpaper, the chair, the photographs, even the grain of the wood floor were clear. Her face appeared to have been rubbed from the photograph while the paper was still wet. I put the print aside. When I looked back, the woman was gone. A handwritten message had appeared across the wallpaper behind the chair. It read, "Bring the record home." I left the dark room. I took none of the photographs with me. That evening, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. They stopped in front of my door. I waited for a knock. None came. I looked through the peephole, but the hall was empty. When I stepped back, a camera flash went off on the other side of the door. I saw the light beneath it. I did not open the door. The next morning, an envelope lay on the floor inside my apartment. It had not been pushed beneath the door. The envelope was too wide to fit through the gap. My name was written on the front. Inside were the 3 prints of the hidden room. I had left them in the dark room. In the first photograph, the room was empty. In the second, the woman sat in the chair. In the third, I was sitting there. I was shown from behind. I wore the same shirt I had worn while photographing the house. The woman stood beside me with one hand resting on my shoulder. There was a fourth photograph in the envelope. It showed the hallway outside my apartment. My door was open. I was visible inside, asleep on the sofa. The photograph had been taken during the night. I went to the police. I told them someone had entered my apartment and photographed me. They examined the doors and windows. There was no sign of forced entry. I did not tell them about the house or the woman. I gave them the photograph of my apartment. The officer asked who had taken it. I said, I don't know. He looked at the image for a long time. Then he asked why I was standing behind the sofa. I took the photograph from him. There was a figure behind me. A man. His face was turned away. He wore the same clothes I had been wearing when I fell asleep. The officer assumed the man was responsible for the photograph. I did not correct him. I returned to Mr. Mercer's office. The building was empty. The company name had been removed from the door. A neighboring business owner told me that the office had been vacant for months. I asked about Daniel Mercer. He said he had never heard the name. I returned to Wren Street. Number 41 was gone. The house had been demolished. The neighboring buildings remained. There was an empty space between numbers 39 and 43. A temporary fence surrounded the lot. I found Mr. Mercer's key in my coat pocket. The same key that I had returned to him 2 days earlier. The blue paint from the front door was still visible around its edge. That night, I dreamed of the hidden room. I sat in the wooden chair. The woman stood beside me. She held a camera beside my head. She told me not to move. Her voice sounded very far away. The flash went off. When I woke, I was sitting in a wooden chair in my kitchen. My camera stood on a tripod across from me. The shutter cable was wrapped around my hand. There was a fresh roll of film inside the camera. I developed it. Every exposure showed the hidden room. In the first photograph, it was empty. In the second, I sat in the chair. In the third, the woman stood behind me. Each photograph brought her closer. By the final frame, her face was beside mine. It was still blurred. My face was not. I was smiling. I burned the negatives. The photographs did not burn. The paper blackened around the edges, but the images remained visible. The woman's face became clearer in the heat. I extinguished the fire before I could see it completely. For the next several weeks, I found photographs inside my apartment. They appeared beneath my pillow, inside kitchen cabinets, between the pages of books, and once inside a sealed carton of milk. They showed me sleeping, eating, bathing, standing at windows. Sometimes the woman was visible. Sometimes I was alone. In several images, a door appeared behind me. It was narrow and painted blue. The door did not exist in my apartment. At least, not at first. I noticed the outline 3 months after photographing the house. It appeared in the wall beside my bedroom. The line was faint, almost indistinguishable from a crack in the plaster. Each morning, the outline became darker. Then, the handle appeared. I covered the wall with a bookcase. The following day, the bookcase stood on the opposite side of the room. The door remained uncovered. I moved out, but the door followed. It appeared in my next apartment within a week. I stayed with my brother. On the third night, he asked why there was a blue door in his hallway. I left before morning. I began sleeping in my car. The photographs continued. I stopped using cameras. I stopped entering buildings alone. I stopped sleeping for more than an hour at a time. None of it mattered. The door appeared wherever I remained for too long. A motel room, a public bathroom, a storage unit, once on the wall of a railway station. Always blue, always locked, always slightly warm when I touched it. I never opened it. 6 months after the house was demolished, I received a letter from the Bellwether Museum. I had never contacted the museum. The letter thanked me for offering the photographs to its collection. It included a donation form bearing my signature. I had not signed it. A museum employee arrived at my apartment the following day. She was an older woman with silver hair. She did not give me her name. She asked whether the door had appeared yet. I told her it had. She asked whether I had opened it. I said no. She seemed relieved. I showed her the photographs and she counted them. There were 14. I told her there should have been 15. She said there were always 15, but one could not be carried. I asked what she meant. She said the final photograph was not a photograph of the room. It was the room. She told me the museum could take the prints, but the record would need to remain incomplete. One photograph had to be missing. One detail had to remain undocumented. Otherwise, the door would have everything it needed to open from the other side. I asked what was on the missing photograph. She said, "Whoever is looking at it." I gave her the 14 prints. I gave her the negatives that remained. I gave her this account. Before leaving, she placed the photographs inside a paper folder and wrapped them with a band. She warned me never to count them again. The blue door disappeared from my apartment that evening. I have not seen it since. I do not believe it is gone. I believe it's been moved. If this account is kept with the photographs, do not attempt to complete the collection. Do not reproduce the missing page. Do not photograph the room if it appears. Most importantly, do not count the photographs. The final line has been added in black ink. It appears to be in the same handwriting as the corrections elsewhere in the statement. It reads, "If there are 15, one of them is yours." End statement. Okay. I'm going to make a few notes before I stop the recording. First, the accession record says the folder contains 15 photographic items. The account says 14 photographs were transferred to the museum. There are currently 14 photos beneath the paper band. I have not counted them individually. I can see the edges. There appear to be 14. I'm aware that saying that probably counts as counting, but I have not removed the band, and I'm not going to. Second, there is no donation form in the folder. There's no correspondence from Thomas Vale. There's no employee report identifying the silver-haired woman who supposedly collected the material. The museum database contains no record of an exhibition, acquisition, or donor associated with Wren Street. There is no Daniel Mercer in the personnel or vendor records. I've not been able to check whether number 41 Wren Street existed because the computer is still behaving strangely. The document window has stopped deleting text. It is now displaying a transcription of the statement. I did not type it. The words are appearing at approximately the same speed that I read them aloud. It is 4 paragraphs behind me, which means the computer has either begun transcribing the recording automatically, or someone upstairs has remote access to the workstation and a deeply unsettling sense of humor. I'm going to inspect the photographs without removing the band. The top photograph shows the exterior of a narrow brick house. The front door is painted blue. The second visible photograph appears to show an entrance hall. I cannot see the others clearly. Wait. There is another photograph beneath the folder. It was not there when I started. It's larger than the prints inside the band. The paper is clean. It appears recently developed. The photograph shows this room. The digitization desk is visible. The computer is on. The recorder is beside my right hand. I'm sitting in the chair. The photograph was taken from behind me. There is no one else in this room. There is a door in the northern wall. The door is blue. There is writing on the back. I'm turning it over. It says, Audio Accession Review, Recording 1. Beneath that, Photograph 15. The computer has stopped transcribing. There's a new sentence on the screen. I have not read this sentence before. It says, Jenna turns towards the door. I'm not turning around. There is no door behind me. The wall behind me is concrete. I know that because I checked the room when I came in. The next sentence is appearing. Jenna hears the handle move. I do not hear anything. I'm ending the review. I'm placing the loose photograph inside the folder without looking at it again. I'm not removing the paper band. I am not counting the photographs. The computer has added another sentence. The recording continues after Jenna leaves. No, it does not. End recording.